Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Shri Gurudev ki jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupada Shatara Shatashmad Shri Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupada Ashatara Shatashmad Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupada Ashatara Shatashmad Shri Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupada Ashatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Maha-Bhagavat Srila Goraksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Dashagunath Sharda Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaura Mandal Vraja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sarva Abhishta Virata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kunda ki jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya ki jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. This is strange. Doesn't seem to be going live on Facebook. Oh no, it is going live on Facebook. Okay, great. Never mind then. Alright, let me share my screen. Dandavat Pranams, Raseshwari Mataji, Madhavi Didi, Rup Manjari Didi, Prajumna Prabhu, Mantramurti Mataji. It's a Kadashi for you there, huh? That's interesting. Alright. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yang pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam tvaipayano virahakatara ajuhava putreti tanmayataya taravo binedu stang sarva bhuta hridaya munimanatosmi. Narayanam namaskrityam narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Shrinvatang Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridantasto Yabhadrani Vidhunoti Suhrit Satam Nashta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tavai Vasmi Na Jivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayamam Charanantikam Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Kshiptashtakamaddhitarangamadhe kripa maitvam Sharanam prapanna vrinde namaste charana ravindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Oh, it's Akadashi there also, huh? Cool. Okay, so let me read from this actually, just to get a quicker recap of what we read. So, once Jaḍa was forcefully engaged by the servants of King Rahūgaṇa to carry his palanquin. While walking, Bharat saw some ants on the path. Being compassionate to the ants, he did not want to step on them. Due to this, the palanquin was being carried very erratically. Actually, I'll share the screen. Rahūgaṇa was agitated and chastised Bharat with sharp words and threatened to punish him. What did he say? He said, "Are you dead or mad? I am your master and I will punish you." Actually, no, first he's being sarcastic. He's saying, "You must be fatigued and old and having such a hard time carrying this all on your own." And then, anyways. Then Jaḍa, being a powerful devotee, he calmly replied, "O king, your sharp words and punishments relate to this body, but I am a spirit soul. As such, none of this pertains to me," actually me, the soul. "Also, material positions of being a king and a servant are temporary. Who is master and who is a servant when all of us are forcefully subservient to material nature? Your punishment to me will only be like beating a dead horse." Saying this, Jaḍa continued to carry the palanquin. Rahūgaṇa was astonished to hear such profound words from apparently a simpleton. Realizing that he was in the presence of a great soul and giving up his pride of being a king, he immediately fell flat at Bharat's feet, begging for forgiveness. The king said, "Who are you? You move about covered and unknown to others." "I am not afraid of Indra's thunderbolt, Shiva's trident, and Yamaraja's punishment, fire, sun, moon, wind, or weapons. But I am afraid of offending a Brahmin. Are you a learned Brahmin wandering in disguise?" Let's see. Hey, where's the first shloka that we ended with? Oh, it's here. Oh, I didn't even see this summary. Look, so this is Rahūgaṇa's sarcastic chastisement, Jaḍa's corresponding reply, and Rahūgaṇa's further questions based on Jaḍa's reply. Anyways, I sent you all the link for this, right? If you ever... Oh, let me just post it here. actually the link for this summary Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam guide. I'll post it in the comments there. There, I just posted, you'll see it on Facebook and YouTube, the comments. That's this PDF that I scanned. So, sorry guys, let me just, okay. So Rahūgaṇa then inquired about various philosophical and spiritual subject matters from Jaḍa. Jaḍa explained how the mind is the cause of entanglement in this world. He said, when the mind is absorbed in sense gratification, it brings about conditional life and suffering. Okay, that's what we're going to read today. Okay, let's just... Okay. I'll just say, the king said, being puffed up with false prestige due to possessing the body of a king, I have offended you. I pray that you glance upon me with mercy so that I can be relieved from the sin of neglecting a devotee. Jaḍa might say that he wouldn't suffer due to Rahūgaṇa's offense. But he said, you are the friend of the Lord, who is the friend of all. There is no loss or gain for you due to my insult. But because of this offense, though I may be as strong as Lord Shiva, I will be vanquished. So this is a really important point. That even if somebody is as powerful as Lord Shiva, even that person is not free from committing, even that person will be destroyed by committing an offense to a Vaishnava. Alright, so now chapter... Jaḍa instructs King Rahūgaṇa. In this chapter, the Brahman Jaḍa instructs Maharaj Rahūgaṇa in detail. He tells the king, you are not very experienced, yet you pose yourself as a learned person because you are very proud of your knowledge. Actually, a person who is on the transcendental platform does not care for social behavior that sacrifices spiritual advancement. Social behavior comes within the jurisdiction of karma kanda, material benefit. No one can spiritually advance by such activities. The conditioned soul is always overpowered by the modes of material nature, and consequently, he is simply concerned with material benefits and auspicious material things. In other words, the mind, which is the leader of the senses, is absorbed in material activities, life after life. Thus, he continuously gets different types of bodies and suffers miserable material conditions. On the basis of mental concoction, social behavior has been formulated. If one's mind is absorbed in these activities, he certainly remains conditioned within the material world. According to different opinions, there are 11 or 12 mental activities, which can be transformed into hundreds and thousands. A person who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to all these material concoctions, and is thus governed by the material energy. A living entity who is free from mental concoctions attains the platform of pure spirit, devoid of material contamination. There are two types of living entities, Jivatma and Paramatma, the individual soul and the Supreme Soul. That Supreme Soul and his ultimate realization is Lord Vasudeva, Krishna. He enters into everyone's heart and controls the living entity in its different activities. He is therefore the supreme shelter of all living entities. One can understand the Supreme Soul and one's position and relationship with him when one is completely freed from the unwanted association of ordinary men. In this way, one can become fit to cross over the ocean of ocean of nescience. The cause of conditional life is attachment to the external energy. One has to conquer these mental concoctions. Unless one does so, he will never be freed from material anxieties. Although mental concoctions have no value, their influence is still very formidable. No one should neglect to control the mind. If one does, the mind becomes so powerful that one immediately forgets his real position. I'm just saving this. Remember, I wanted to save it. Sorry. Forgetting that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, and that service to Krishna is his only business, one is doomed by material nature to serve the objects of the senses. One should kill mental concoctions by the sword of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotee. Guru Krishna Prasade Pai, Bhakti Lata Beach. Text 1. Brahmanuvacha Akovida Kovida Vadavadan Vadasyasto Nati Vidam Varishta Nasurayo Hi Vyavaharaminam Tattva Vamarshena Saha Mananti. The Brahman Jaḍa said, "My dear king, although you are not at all experienced, you are trying to speak like a very experienced man. Consequently, you cannot be considered an experienced man. An experienced person does not speak the way you are speaking about the relationship between a master and a servant, or about material pains and pleasures. These are simply external activities. Any advanced, experienced man, considering the absolute truth, does not talk in this way." Purport. Krishna similarly chastised Arjuna, "Asocyan anvasochastvang pragya vadangshta bhashase." While speaking learned words, you are lamenting for that which is not worthy of grief. That's Bhagavad Gita 2:11. Similarly, among people in general, 99.9% try to talk like experienced advisors, but they are actually devoid of spiritual knowledge, and are therefore like inexperienced children, speaking nonsensically. Consequently, their words cannot be given any importance. One has to learn from Krishna or his devotee. If one speaks on the basis of this experience, that is, on the basis of spiritual knowledge, one's words are valuable. At the present moment, the entire world is full of foolish people. Bhagavad Gita describes these people as mudas. They are trying to rule human society, but because they are devoid of spiritual knowledge, the entire world is in a chaotic condition. To be released from these miserable conditions, one has to become Krishna conscious and take lessons from an exalted personality like Jaḍa, Lord Krishna, and Kapila Dev. This is the only way to solve the problems of material life. I'm just seeing what King Rahūgaṇa's questions were, though. Okay, so King Rahūgaṇa, he asked, although the soul is different from the body, the soul appears to be fatigued due to bodily labor, like carrying a palanquin. One cannot carry water with a false pot, so one must accept the conventional world. By heating a pot, milk in the pot becomes hot, and rice within the milk gets cooked. Similarly, due to bodily pains and pleasures, the senses, mind, and soul are affected. So even if the king's position is temporary and conventional, it is his duty to rule and punish the disobedient citizens, and thus teach the citizens to obey the state laws. Punishing is not useless if one is engaged in one's duty as ordered by the Lord. A king engaged in his dharma of punishing the citizens worships the Lord and vanquishes all his sins. So, these are questions about Jaḍa's arguments that he weren't fatigued, questions about the impermanence of the master-servant relationship, and questions about the uselessness of punishing a madman. So this is what Bharata's responding to. Tathaiva rajan urugarhameda vitana vidyoru virjimbiteshu navedavadeshu hitatvavada prayena shuddho nuchakasti sadhu. My dear king, talks of the relationship between the master and the servant, the king and the subject, and so forth, are simply talks about material activities. People interested in material activities, which are expounded in the Vedas, are intent on performing material sacrifices and placing faith in their material activities. For such people, spiritual advancement is definitely not manifest. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, two words are significant: Vedavada and Tattvavada. According to Bhagavad Gita, those who are simply attached to the Vedas and who do not understand the purpose of the Vedas or the Vedanta Sutra are called Veda Vada Rata. Ya imam pushpitam bacham prabhadyanta vipashchita Veda Vada Rata parta nanyarasiti vadina kamatmana sarga para janma karma phala pradam kriya visheshu bahulam bhogaishvarya gatim prati. Men of small knowledge are very much attracted to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. That's from Bhagavad Gita 2:42 to 43. The Veda Vada followers of the Vedas are generally inclined to karma kanda, the performance of sacrifice according to the Vedic injunctions. They are thereby promoted to higher planetary systems. They generally practice the Chaturmasya system. Akshayan ha vai Chaturmasya yajina sukritim bhavati. One who performs the Chaturmasya yajna becomes pious. By becoming pious, one may be promoted to the higher planetary systems. Urdhvam gachanti sattvasta. Some of the followers of the Vedas are attracted to karma kanda, the fruitive activities of the Vedas, in order to be promoted to a higher standard of life. Others argue that this is not the purpose of the Vedas. Tad nitai veha karmachita loka kshiyate evam uttara punya jita loka kshiyate. In this world, someone may be very highly elevated by taking birth in an aristocratic family, by being well educated, beautiful, or very rich. These are the gifts for pious activities enacted in the past life. However, these will be finished when the stock of pious activity is finished. If we become attached to pious activities, we may get these various worldly facilities in the next life and may take birth in the heavenly planets. But all this will eventually be finished. Kshine punye marta lokam vishanti. Bhagavad Gita 9:21. When the stock of pious activity is finished, one again has to come to this Martya Loka. According to the Vedic injunctions, the performance of pious activity is not really the objective of the Vedas. The objective of the Vedas is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Vedaishta sarvara aham eva vedya. The objective of the Vedas is to understand Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are Vedavadis are not actually advanced in knowledge, and those who are followers of Gyan Kanda, Brahman understanding, are also not perfect. However, when one comes to the platform of Upasana and accepts the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes perfect. Aradhanam sarvesham Vishnur aradhanam param. In the Vedas, the worship of different demigods and the performance of sacrifice are certainly mentioned, but such worship is inferior because the worshippers do not know that the ultimate goal is Vishnu. Nate vidu svarta gatim hi Vishnum. When one comes to the platform of Vishnur Aradhanam, or Bhakti Yoga, one has attained the perfection of life. Otherwise, as indicated in Bhagavad Gita, one is not a tattvavadi, but a Vedavadi, a blind follower of the Vedic injunctions. A Vedavadi cannot be purified from material contamination unless he becomes a tattvavadi, that is, one who knows tattva, the absolute truth. Tattva is also experienced in three features: Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti Shabdate. After coming to the platform of understanding tattva, it didn't explain what this meant. So the absolute truth is experienced in three features. That is Brahma, impersonal Brahman, like the, and then Paramatma, the super soul, and then Bhagavan. Anyways. Even after coming to the platform of understanding tattva, one must worship Bhagavan, Vishnu, and his expansions, or one is not yet perfect. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanabang mam prapadyate. After many births, one who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto Krishna. The conclusion is that the unintelligent men with a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand Bhagavan, Brahman, or Paramatma. But after studying the Vedas and attaining the understanding of the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is supposed to be on the platform of perfect knowledge. One is supposed to be. Alright. 1 second. Natasya tattva grahanaya shakshad variyasir api vachasamasan swapne niruktya grihame dishokyam nayasya heyanumitam swayam swat. A dream becomes automatically known to a person as false and immaterial. And similarly, one eventually realizes that material happiness in this life or the next, on this planet or a higher planet, is insignificant. When one realizes this, the Vedas, although an excellent source, are insufficient to bring about direct knowledge of the truth. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 2.45, Krishna advised Arjuna to become transcendental to the material activities impelled by the three material modes of nature. Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. The purpose of Vedic study is to transcend the activities of the three modes of material nature. Of course, in the material world, the mode of goodness is accepted as the best, and one can be promoted to the higher planetary systems by being on the Sattva Gun platform. However, this is not perfection. One must come to the conclusion that even the Sattva Gun platform is also not good. One may dream that he has become a king with a good family, wife and children, but immediately at the end of that dream, he comes to the conclusion that it is false. Similarly, all kinds of material happiness are undesirable for a person who wants spiritual salvation. If a person does not come to the conclusion that he has nothing to do with any kind of material happiness, he cannot come to the platform of understanding the absolute truth, or tattva gyan. Karmis, Gyanis, and Yogis, Karmis, Gyanis, and Yogis are after some material elevation. The Karmis work hard day and night for some bodily comfort, and the Gyanis simply speculate how to get out of the entanglement of karma and merge into the Brahman effulgence. The Yogis are very much addicted to the acquisition of material perfection and magical powers. All of them are trying to be materially perfect, but a devotee very easily comes to the platform of nirgun in devotional service. And consequently, for the devotee, the results of karma, gyan, and yoga become very insignificant. Therefore, only the devotee is on the platform of tattva gyan, not the others. Of course, the Gyani's position is better than that of the Karmi, but that position is also insufficient. The Gyani must actually become liberated, and after liberation, he may be situated in devotional service. Mad bhaktim labate param. Yavan manorajasa purushasya Satvena Vatama Vanuruddham Cheto Virakuti Viratanoti. Nirankusham kushalam chetarangva. As long as the mind of the living entity is contaminated by the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, his mind is exactly like an independent, uncontrolled elephant. It simply expands its jurisdiction of pious and impious activities by using the senses. The result is that the living entity remains in the material world to enjoy and suffer pleasures and pains due to material activity. Purport. In Chaitanya Charitamrita it is said that material pious and impious activities are both opposed to the principles of devotional service. Devotional service means mukti, freedom from material entanglement. But pious and impious activities result in entanglement within this material world. If the mind is captivated by the pious and impious activities mentioned in the Vedas, one remains eternally in darkness. One cannot attain the absolute platform. To change the consciousness from ignorance to passion, or from passion to goodness, does not really solve the problem. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, Sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One must come to the transcendental platform. Otherwise, life's mission is never fulfilled. Savasanatma vishayo parokto gunan pravaho vikrita sudashatma bibhrat pritan namabhirupabhedam antarbahistvam chapuraistanoti. Because the mind is absorbed in desires for pious and impious activities, it is naturally subjected to the transformations of lust and anger. In this way, it becomes attracted to material sense enjoyment. In other words, the mind is conducted by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. There are 11 senses and 5 material elements, and out of these 16 items, the mind is the chief. Therefore, the mind brings about birth in different types of bodies, among demigods, human beings, animals, and birds. When the mind is situated in a higher or lower position, it accepts a higher or lower material body. Purport. Transmigration among the 8,400,000 species is due to the minds being polluted by certain material qualities. Due to the minds, the soul is subjected to pious and impious activities. The continuation of material existence is like the waves of material nature. In this regard, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Jacha mayar vashe, jacha veshe, kacho habu, dubu bai. Radha Krishna bol bol bolare sabai. My dear brother, the spirit soul is completely under the control of Maya, and you are being carried away by its waves. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimurdatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. Material existence means being fully controlled by material nature. The mind is the center for accepting the dictations of material nature. In this way, the living entity is carried away in different types of bodies continuously, millennium after millennium. Krishna bhuli she jeev anadir bahirmukh ataiva mayatare de sangsara dukh. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 21:17. Due to the living entity's forgetfulness of Krishna, one is bound by the laws of material nature. Dukkam sukham. Class chalche. Dukam sukam vyaktiriktam chativram kalopapanam palamavyanakti alingyat maya rachitantaratma swadehinam sangsriti chakrakuta. The materialistic mind, covering the living entity's soul, carries it to different species of life. This is called continued material existence. Due to the minds, the living entity suffers or enjoys material distress and happiness. Being thus illusions, the mind further creates pious and impious activities and their karma, and thus the soul becomes conditioned. Purport. Mental activities under the influence of material nature cause happiness and distress within the material world. Being covered by illusion, the living entity eternally continues conditioned life under different designations. Such living entities are known as Nitya-Baddha, eternally conditioned. On the whole, the mind is the cause of conditioned life. Therefore, the entire yogic process is meant to control the mind and the senses. If the mind is controlled, the senses are automatically controlled, and therefore the soul is saved from the reactions of pious and impious activity. If the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, Savayamana Krishna Padaravindayo, the senses are automatically engaged in the Lord's service. When the mind and senses are engaged in devotional service, the living entity naturally becomes Krishna conscious. As soon as one always thinks of Krishna, he becomes a perfect yogi, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Yoginam apisarvesham margatenan taratmana. This antaratma, the mind, is conditioned by material nature. As stated here, Maya rachitantaratma swadehinam sansriti chakra kuta. The mind, being most powerful, covers the living entity and puts him in the waves of material existence. Tavanayang vyavahara sadhavi kshetragya shakshyo bhavati stula shukshma tasman mano lingam ado vadanti guna gunatvasya paravarasya. The mind makes the living entity within this material world wander through different species of life, and thus the living entity experiences mundane affairs in different forms as a human being, demigod, fat person, skinny person, and so forth. Learned scholars say that bodily appearance, bondage, and liberation are caused by the mind. Purport. Just as the mind is the cause of bondage, it can also be the cause of liberation. The mind is described here as para avara. Para means transcendental, and avara means material. When the mind is engaged in the Lord's service, Savayamana Krishna Padaravindayo, it is called para, transcendental. When the mind is engaged in material sense gratification, it is called avara, or material. At the present moment, in our conditioned state, our mind is fully absorbed in material sense gratification, but it can be purified and brought to its original Krishna consciousness by the process of devotional service. We have often given the example of Ambarish Maharaj. Savayamana Krishna Padaravindayo Vachangsi Vaikunta Gunanuvarnane. The mind must be controlled in Krishna consciousness. The tongue can be utilized to spread the message of Krishna and glorify the Lord or take prasad, the remnants of food offered to Krishna. Sevan mukhe hi jivadho. When one utilizes the tongue in the service of the Lord, the other senses can become purified. As stated in the Narad Pancharatra, Sarva Pari Vinir Muktam Tat Paratvena Nirmalam. When the mind and senses are purified, one's total existence is purified, and one's designations are also purified. One no longer considers himself a human being, a demigod, cat, dog, Hindu, Muslim, and so forth. When the senses and mind are purified and one is fully engaged in Krishna's service, one can be liberated and return home back to Godhead. Gunanuraktam vyasanaya janto kshemaya nairgunyam ato manasyat yata pradipo gritavartimashnan shikha sadhu ma bhajati hanyadasvam padam tata guna karmanubhadam vrittirmanashayate nyatra tattvam. When the living entity's mind becomes absorbed in sense gratification of the material world, it brings about his conditioned life and suffering within the material situation. However, when the mind becomes unattached to material enjoyment, it becomes the cause of liberation. When the flame in a lamp burns the wick improperly, the lamp is blackened. But when the lamp is filled with ghee and is burning properly, there is bright illumination. Similarly, when the mind is absorbed in material sense gratification, it causes suffering, and when detached from material sense gratification, it brings about the original brightness of Krishna consciousness. Purport: It is therefore concluded that the mind is the cause of material existence and liberation also. Everyone is suffering in this material world because of the mind. It is therefore proper to train the mind or to cleanse the mind from material attachment and engage it fully in the Lord's service. This is called spiritual engagement. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samititaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita 14:26. We should engage the mind fully in Krishna conscious activities. Then it will be the cause of our liberation, for our returning home back to Godhead. However, if we keep the mind engaged in material activities for sense gratification, it will cause continuous bondage and will make us remain in this material world in different bodies, suffering the consequences of our different actions. Ekadashasan manaso hivrittaya akutaya pancha diyo bhimana matrani karmani purang chatasvan vadanti haika dashavira bhumi. There are 5 working senses and 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. There is also the false ego. In this way, there are 11 items for the mind's functions. O hero, the objects of the senses, such as sound and touch, the organic activities, such as evacuation, and the different types of bodies, society, friendship, and personality, are considered by learned scholars the fields of activity for the functions of the mind. Purport: The mind is the controller of the five knowledge-acquiring senses and the 5 working senses. Each sense has its particular field of activity. In all cases, the mind is the controller or owner. By the false ego, one thinks oneself the body and thinks in terms of my body, my house, my family, my society, my nation, and so on. These false identifications are due to the expansions of the false ego. Thus, one thinks that he is this or that. Thus, the living entity becomes entangled in material existence. One second, let's see. What verse are we reading up to today? Just want to check. We're reading up to verse 14. Okay. Gandhakriti sparsha rasa sarvangshasi. Let me just check everything's working okay also. Looks like it. Gandhakriti sparsha rasa sarvangshasi. Visargaratyartha bijalpa shilpa ekadasham swikaranam mameti shayam ahang dashameka ahu. Sound, touch, form, taste, and smell are the objects of the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. Speech, touch, movement, evacuation, and sexual intercourse are the objects of the working senses. Besides this, there is another conception by which one thinks, this is my body, this is my society, this is my family, this is my nation, and so forth. This 11th function, that of the mind, is called the false ego. According to some philosophers, this is the 12th function, and it is the field of activity, and its field of activity is the body. Purport. There are different objects for the 11 items. Through the nose we can smell, by the eyes we can see, by the ears we can hear, and in this way we gather knowledge. Similarly, there are the karmendriyas, the working senses, the hands, legs, genitals, rectum, mouth, and so forth. When the false ego expands, it makes one think, this is my body, my family, society, country, etc. Dravya svabhava shaya karma kalar ekadashami manaso vikara sahasrasha shatasha kotishascha kshetra gyata na mitana svatasyu. The physical elements, nature, the original cause, culture, destiny, and the time element are all material causes. Agitated by these material causes, the 11 functions transform into hundreds of functions, and then into thousands, and then into millions. But all these transformations do not take place automatically by mutual combination. Rather, they are under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. One should not think that all of the interactions of the material elements, gross and subtle, that cause the transformation of mind and consciousness are working independently. They are under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Krishna says that the Lord is situated in everyone's heart. Sarvasva chaham hridisannivishto mata. Mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. As mentioned herein, the Supersoul, Kshetragya, is directing everything. The living entity is also Kshetragya, but the Supreme Kshetragya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the witness and order giver. Under his direction, everything takes place. The different inclinations of the living entity are created by his own nature or his expectations, and he is trained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the agency of material nature. The body, nature, and the physical elements are under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They do not function automatically. Nature is neither independent nor automatic. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is behind nature. Maya dakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena konteya jagar viparivartate. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated, again and again. Bhagavad Gita 9:10. Okay. Kshetragya eta manaso vibhutir jivasya maya rachitasya nitya avirhita kvapi tirohitascha shuddha vachaste yavishuddha kartu. The individual soul bereft of Krishna consciousness has many ideas and activities created in the mind by the external energy. They have been existing from time immemorial. Sometimes they are manifest in the awakening state and in the
Sometimes they're manifest in the awakening state and in the dream state. But during deep sleep, unconsciousness, or trance, they disappear. A person who is liberated in this life, a Jivan Mukta, can see all these things vividly. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 13.3, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. There are two kinds of kshetragya, or living beings. One is the individual living being, and the other is the supreme living being. The ordinary living being knows about his body to some extent, but the supreme Paramatma knows the condition of all bodies. The supreme Paramatma knows the condition of all bodies. The individual living being is localized, and the supreme Paramatma is all-pervading. In this shloka, the word kshetragya refers to an ordinary living being, not the supreme living being. This ordinary living being is of two kinds, nitya-baddha or nitya-mukta. One is eternally conditioned, and the other is eternally liberated. The eternally liberated living being... The eternally liberated living beings are in the Vaikuntha Jagat, the spiritual world, and they never fall into the material world. Those in the material world are conditioned souls, nitya-baddha. The nitya-baddhas can become liberated by controlling the mind because the cause of conditioned life is the mind. When the mind is trained and the soul is not under the mind's control, the soul can be liberated even in this material world. When it is liberated, one is called a Jivan Mukta. A Jivan Mukta knows how he has become conditioned. Therefore, he tries to purify himself and return home back to Godhead. The eternally conditioned soul is eternally conditioned because he is controlled by the mind. The conditioned state and liberated state are compared to the sleeping, unconscious state and the awakened state. Those who are sleeping and unconscious are eternally conditioned, but those who are awake understand that they are eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Therefore, even in this material world, they engage in Krishna's service. As confirmed by Srila Rupa Goswami, Iha yasya harer dasye. If one takes to Krishna's service, he is liberated, even though he appears to be a conditioned soul within the material world. Jivan mukta sa uchate. In any condition, one is to be considered liberated if his only business is to serve Krishna. Okay, last two verses. Kshetragya atma purusha purana shakshat swayam jyotir aja paresha narayano bhagavan vasudeva swamaya yatman yavriti yamana yata nilastavara jankamanam atma sarupena nivishta ishet evam paro bhagavan vasudeva kshetragya atmedam anuparvishta. There are two kinds of kshetragya, the living entity, as explained above, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is explained as follows. He is the all-pervading cause of creation. He is full in himself, and is not dependent on others. He is perceived by hearing and direct perception. He is self-effulgent, and does not experience birth, death, old age, or disease. He is the controller of all the demigods, beginning with Lord Brahma. He is called Narayan, and he is the shelter of living entities after the annihilation of this material world. He is full of all opulences, and he is the resting place of everything material. He is therefore known as Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By his own potency, he is present within the hearts of all living entities, just as the air or vital force is within the bodies of all beings, moving and non-moving. In this way, he controls the body. In his partial feature, the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters all bodies and controls them. Purport. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matasmritir jnanam apohanam cha. Every living entity is controlled by the Supreme Living Being, Paramatma, who resides within everyone's heart. He is the Purusha avatar, who creates this material world. The first Purusha avatar is Mahavishnu, and that Mahavishnu is the plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna's first expansion is Baladev, and his next expansions are Vasudev, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna. Vasudeva is the original cause of the Brahmajyoti, and the Brahmajyoti is the expansion of the rays of the body of Vasudeva. Yasya prabha prabhavato jagaranda koti kotishvashesha vasudadi vibhuti binam tad brahma nishkalamanantam ashesha bhutam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is endowed with great power. The glowing effulgence of his transcendental form is the impersonal Brahman, which is absolute, complete, and unlimited, and which displays the varieties of countless planets with their different opulences in millions and millions of universes. Brahma Samhita 540. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is thus described in Bhagavad Gita, Mayam tatam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina matstani sarvabhutani na chaham teshvavastita. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are within me, but I am not within them. Bhagavad Gita 9.4. This is the position of the plenary expansions of Krishna as the all-pervading Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Alright, so tomorrow we will read about the deliverance of the conditioned souls from illusion. The jiva wanders in samsara until he comes to the platform of self-realization. The mind is the cause of all tribulations. Conquer it by neglect, attentiveness, and service to Guru and Krishna. That's what we'll read tomorrow. And also we'll read a bit of chapter 12. Alright. Today, I don't know, just because of Akadashi fasting, my mind is just like, we're reading all about focusing the mind, and I couldn't even focus on what we were reading right at that very moment, because, anyways, sometimes I get like that from fasting. But anyways, I'll read the recap and then I'll understand. I don't even know how I was reading though, if I was reading clearly or what. Anyways, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju Ki Jai Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Shala Bhakti Viranta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shala Gurudev Ki Jai Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Shala Bhakti Viranta Vaman Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitil Pravishta Maha-Bhagavat Srila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Nitil Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai, Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jeev Gopal Bhattadash Raghunath, Shar Gosai Prabhu ki jai, Shri Surup Damodar Rai Ramanandari, Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai, Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुर वृंदावन धाम की जय। सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदत्त गिरिराज महाराज की जय। श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जय। श्री मुन देवी गंगा देवी की जय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाया की जय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवाय च कृष्ण भक्ति पद देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वंशा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। The answer is yes, Pradyumna Prabhu. No, the Jagannath Deity needs to be installed. Pradyumna. All right. Hari Bol, everybody. See you tomorrow. End stream. Jai Shri Radhe.